we're always looking for volunteers. If you have a suggestion or things that you would like to contribute, please do so. I see a lot of familiar faces that are already contributing, so I appreciate that. Today we'll have a very short report from our board, and we will spend the bulk of our meeting hosting our guest speaker, our New York State Assembly Representative Rebecca Kassay. I also would like to acknowledge the presence of our elected officials. Civic is here from the Suffolk County Assembly. And other than that, I think we're ready to go.
You have another elected.
In a personal capacity.
Okay. Never mind. He's not here.
Right.
No, those who come in official capacity tell us. Others are coming in the personal capacity as residents. From our side, we had a really great walkability meeting, a speaker dedicated to that, and we had a really lovely print. Is that right?
Yes.
Do you want to give a short update on that?
Of course, because we've actually advanced since then.
Please.
And the article, if you haven't seen it, in TBR, a picture of Cynthia Brown and myself on the front page, and a well-rounded report of our last meeting. I'm Janice, and we have a walkability committee that started 2 years ago around the time that Haydick Engineering presented their walkability study to the village at Village Hall. We have Rebecca to thank for starting that engine, getting that started, and we've been here 2 years trying to get to where we are now, which is Haydick. We've met with Haydick Engineering twice, and they have a deadline to come up with the cost analysis for the 1 or 2 projects that we're going to go ahead with, which means that what we talked about with Caroline, between Barnum and Brook, there might be some improvements, and Scraggy Hill, between the dead end coming around to the pool entrance of the elementary school and possibly to High Street on Myrtle. And what I would hope for is including the whole neighborhood on the eastern part of the village. So I call that the central eastern part of the village, going east of St. Charles, east of Scraggy Hill, to connect all those neighborhoods to the hubs of the village. But it's all small steps, and just to make it friendly to pedestrians. And it's just been tremendous. We're looking at the SS4A Safe Streets for All federal grant. There's a lot of money, there's $1 billion available, and this is the last year. June 2026 is the deadline to apply for that. So there's more to come, hopefully.
We also have a quality of life committee. We have finally got our act together, and we, one of our members, Al Kasari, volunteered to draft a well-rounded letter. So we finally requested the village to tone down the lights at the golf course. So we understand that they are investigating that, how to address that. So once we get more updates, we will be sending that out. Next meeting, it's a little bit too early to talk about it, but our other quality of life committee, we're preparing a speaker which is focused on electric gasoline powered equipment, noise, and the alternatives, and that would be the subject or the theme for September. Do we have financial report?
Yes. So as treasurer, I just want to inform you that if you haven't paid your dues, please do so. It's appreciated. And our current balance in the account is $1,918.84. Thank you to all.
All right. without too much ado, let us introduce our Rebecca Kassay, our resident and our state representative. Would you give us a very brief overview about like how were your last, what is it, 8 months?
Eight months, finished 7, working on the 8th.
7 months
There we
in
go.
office.
There we
What
go.
what happened? And then we'll field some questions from me. I'll abuse that power for a moment, and then we'll field the questions from the floor.
Super. Thank you so much, and thank you to the whole Civic board, for everyone who regularly comes out to Civics. This is where community work happens, and so you're hearing about walkability, you're hearing about quality of life issues. You know, this is your investment in this in your community. I hope comes back in spades. And one of my most privileged roles is helping you navigate those issues, both on the local level and of course at the state level. So as you know, I was a village trustee for 4 years. I'm now at the state assembly, and it is an incredible experience. I keep telling folks it's the job I never knew I always wanted, to be up there and have the privilege to sit in my office in Albany and hear from advocates, whether they're constituents coming up from the area or advocates from across the state, from different professions, telling me what their experience is and issues that they see need to be addressed throughout New York State or in their local communities. So if I wake up every day and say I have the opportunity to help make some folks' lives just a little bit better, that's the greatest privilege that I could ever hope for in life. So I'm so grateful to be there. It has been such an interesting experience, and so I always start by saying we're in session in Albany from January through June, 3 to 5 days a week. So you might have seen me on the weekends or late in the week during the first half of the year, and then the second half of the year you're here in the community. And it's been I told myself a very pretty lie that I would have a little bit more downtime when I came back after session, and I'm really glad that things haven't slowed down, because I get to come to community events like this more often. We get to visit nonprofits in the area, businesses, groups, and really deeply understand what the community needs in order for me to then go and be in my office down here and up in Albany leading the community. So some highlights from this year. We have some legislative cards that we put together so that folks can take them home. But the things that I'm most excited and proud of bringing home this year, I was able to put forth a bill to increase the amount that the state would reimburse for folks who are getting their cesspool or septic systems replaced. Previously, the state would reimburse up to $10,000, and the county would kick in some money, but it still wasn't enough to cover these advanced septic systems, which take a lot more of the nitrogen and the phosphorus out of the water, so it protects our water quality. And I think most folks want to do the right thing environmentally, but if the cost difference is so great for a lot of us with the high cost of living here on Long Island, that ends up making the decision. So I put in a bill to increase that from $10,000 to $25,000 of reimbursement from the state, and that got moved forward, and the governor just signed it into law a couple weeks ago. So I'm like, now I'm out there telling everybody and everyone, tell your friends, if you hear of anybody who's been complaining about their cesspools, getting a little funky, they're backing up, take the opportunity now. We're partnered with the county, so you would apply through the county. You could always call our office for guidance on how to put that application in. But there's out of the $30 million of funding that the state is putting towards this program, I locked in $20 million for Suffolk County alone. It's because we have such an important aquifer, and as well as our water on the Long Island Sound and in the bays to protect. So that $20 million, it's a lot, but it's going to go quick. So I'm urging all of my residents, if this is a project that you've been putting off, that you want to take advantage of, don't miss out on that $25K, and then the county kicks in some money, and it almost covers the cost of the project itself, or at least makes it comparable to as if you were replacing it with the old donut, cesspool system. So please help me spread the word on that. And I'm just, again, this perfect crossroads for me of cost of living and environmental issues that I want to deliver on. So that was something I'm really excited about. I had a most dramatic and yet boring to the outsider, most outsiders, bill that was actually the very, very last bill of the 2025 session in the New York State Assembly, because it kept falling off the table. and it is the bill that furthers the electrification of the Port Jefferson train station here. Essentially, I dove in as soon as I got into office and I said, what's the holdup here? Because I've knocked on doors of folks in Port Jeff Station. There was one woman I spoke to the other day. She said, I moved in the late 70s. I bought my house in the late 70s, and they said, oh, in a couple years, this train line will be electrified. And then now she's moving out. She says, damn thing's never electrified, you know? So I said, I'm working on it. Sorry I didn't catch you, you know? But it is essentially, one of the holdups is the DOT, the New York State DOT, has to grant an easement to the MTA in order to utilize about 40 acres of the Lawrence Aviation property. The Lawrence Aviation property has been delisted from the Superfund site list by the EPA, and so because of all the great work that so many folks have done for decades cleaning that property up, they've broken it into 3 parcels. A third of it, 40 acres, is going to be preserved by the town of Brookhaven. A third of it is going to be a solar farm, and then a third of it is being offered to the MTA by the Suffolk County Land Bank for a whopping $10. It's a $10 contract for 40 acres. On Long Island, you can't do anything better than that. And especially finding 40 acres along the rail yard, the rail line that you're looking to electrify. So, you know, I jumped right in and I said, what can I do? How can I help? And they said, well, there's this easement issue. So I introduced a bill directing the DOT to grant the easement to the MTA. And that stirred up all sorts of drama, I'll just say, in Albany. You know, departments, you know, said, oh, you know, we're working on it on our own timeline. I said, the community's been listening to timelines for decades, and this is something that Suffolk County has to figure out what they're doing with this parcel, and if the MTA doesn't want it, they're gonna make a different decision. I've heard it floated, you know, oh, well, maybe we look at it for a transfer station. Like, no, we do not want a transfer station instead of an electrified rail yard. So I pushed really, really hard, made some friends, made some enemies in the departments, but you know, at the end of the day, delivering for our community is top priority for this. And so I kept picking it up off the ground, putting it back on the table, and eventually it got its very own agenda at the very last day of session, and in the wee hours of the morning passed. And so now we're waiting for the governor to sign that into law. I've submitted that as my top priority for her to consider. Her team knows deeply, you know, we're lucky to have a regional representative in the governor's team who used to work in the county, in the area, so he knows deeply the importance of this, having worked on it himself, so I'm really grateful to have a partner there. And so I'm hoping to be able to bring news to you sooner than later that the governor has signed that into law, therefore overcoming one of the hurdles for this $10 contract. I put in a budget ask for the $10, and when they didn't give it to me, I told them, fine, I'll just pay for it myself. But you know, it's one of these big issues that you know, is built of many, many small pieces. So I'm glad to have worked, and if nothing else, you know, shaken some folks to say, hey, we really got to get this done. So that'll mean a lot for the area here, both for air quality, of course, moving away from the diesel, but as well as making it that one-seat ride that all of us out here have always wanted. I know I'm guilty. Sometimes I'll drive down to Ronkonkoma Station because the trains run more frequently, and when you get your butt in a seat, you know you have that seat until you're in the city. That's not the case out here, and so both for our commuters and folks who want to use it recreationally, they deserve that one-seat ride. So we're going to keep pushing on that. I'm really grateful to partners at the county again to you know, to keep that moving forward, and again, hope to have good news on that soon. I'm trying to think what other topics you want me to touch upon.
This would be the perfect time for me to step in.
Yes, go for it.
Jumping in with environmental concerns, just because it's the summer, it's really hot, and my phone is keep buzzing. Please conserve water. Please don't water the lawn. And I also walk out and I see sprinklers going on, regardless of whether it's the odd or the even. And it goes back to this culture of that's how we interpret how our lawns should look like. This is what we do. And it's kind of like difficult to imagine what it means to not have water. What, if anything, state can do to help us to preserve water and potentially not get rid of the lawn, but maybe figure out a way to reduce this simple footprint.
Sure.
Of it.
So there's so many layers to that. So first, and I've been trying to get the word out, a lot of folks say, oh, you know, conserve water? What does it mean? Why is it important? There's this whole aquifer full of water, and I can't stress enough, beyond the big picture of water conservation, the reason that the Suffolk County Water Authority is sending out all those messages is largely because if we don't have enough pressure in our water systems, if there's too much water being used at once, the firefighters will not have the water pressure to put fires out if a home or other property is on fire. And so that is a message that I'm also trying to get out to the public, that it's, yes, it's about, conservation and water quality, but it's largely in the short term about making sure that, goodness forbid, anyone needs that service, that our public safety folks are able to do the job that they're set out to do and not have low water pressure when fighting fires. So that's the immediate importance of conserving water. I hope that municipalities are every time I go past I'm not going to name names, municipalities, parks throughout the district, and I see that they're watering their parks, and while we're telling homeowners not to water their homes, I'm working on a way to diplomatically say, hey, if we're asking individuals to do something, we as the government have to be doing it ourselves. In a grand scheme picture, something that I've begun talking about here at the village, and I'm happy to continue if there's appetite for it in the village, but there's two big opportunities within my assembly district for water effluent reuse. So we have a sewage treatment plant here on the harbor in Port Jeff Village, and there's another one on Stony Brook campus. And so out in Riverhead at Indian Head Island Golf Course, they have added different layers of treatment to the water that comes out of the sewage treatment plant in order to use it on the golf course instead of pulling water up from our aquifer. And then it has the added benefits of already having nitrogen and phosphorus in that water from the sewage that once was in there. So it actually saves golf courses money in buying fertilizer, but also there's less fertilizer runoff because you're not applying some kind of grit to it. It's just in the water. But it's also helping us recharge our water in our aquifer. So you figure if a water goes through the sewage treatment plant, whether it's from your shower, your toilet, goes through all its processes and gets clean enough, and then goes out into the Long Island Sound, that's not salt water going into salt water. And so now we've lost our fresh water, right? And so if we're spreading it instead on something like a golf course, it has the opportunity to start its 400-year journey down towards the aquifer. But one of the issues we're seeing with aquifer levels decreasing is that we have hardscaped so much of the surfaces on Long Island. So when it rains, a lot of that water runs off into stormwater sewage systems and out into the Long Island Sound or the bays, and so we're not recharging the way we were. So there's so many benefits to using treated effluent on golf courses. It's just about building the infrastructure and getting those extra layers of treatment in order to make it so it's not stinky. And I'm going to be doing a field trip out to Indian Head Island to prove to some skeptics that it is not. As long as you have the proper treatment, it doesn't smell like poo on the golf course. Because if it did, I wouldn't be behind it. Not that I'm a golfer, but I do respect the sport. So that's something that we're working on, making sure that the Environmental Bond Act money is accessible for water reuse projects. Water reuse is a little bit specific to Long Island. There are some other areas that do have aquifers in the state, but it's not as singular and reliant. So I want to make sure that the language there allows for our municipalities to tap into that Bond Act money, bring that money home to have infrastructure between Stony Brook University sewage treatment plant and St. George's Golf Course. And then the wild idea, which the more I looked into it seemed not so wild, was the Port Jefferson sewage treatment plant piping under the harbor and going up to the Port Jefferson Golf Course. Can anyone guess how many millions of gallons of water that the golf course is capped at last I heard? Sir? Anyone?
Inside information.
What do you got?
10 million.
10 million gallons of water a year.
Sounds like a lot.
Yeah, it is.
But it's not, and they would use twice that if they were allowed to. And so, and St. George's is so much larger of a golf course as well. So if you think of, all right, reduce your shower by a minute and you save a couple gallons of water and you feel good about that. If we could reduce tens of millions of gallons of water from being pulled from the aquifer, this would help on so many levels. So that's something that I'm actively having my team look into, work with the folks who look at the itty bitty pieces of language and which determines what is and is not applicable for the money, and trying to bring it home. Working with, we visited Suffolk, Stony Brook's Center for Clean Water Technology, got to see amazing work that they're doing in different realms as far as both at home and municipal treatment of water and all, but they're on board, and so we're gonna keep moving forward with that.
Speaking of water, just one more thing that I absolutely accidentally happened upon when I was researching something very different. One of the really interesting ways how we can recharge our aquifers is by leaving the leaves and planting native plants.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of our plants that are available in Home Depot or Lowe's or larger nurseries are either invasive or not native, and we have an interesting habit of removing the leaves from our properties and thus facilitating more of a runoff that goes onto the streets and then further into the harbor or into the flood zones in the village. What, if anything, the state, do you think, could do to facilitate enforcement of not selling burning bushes and the rest of the invasives that the law is already there,
Sure.
but it's not being applied to the larger nurseries,
Right.
while also promoting plant the native and leave the leaves.
Right, and so I served on the Long Island Native Plant Initiative Board for 6 years, worked on this on a local nonprofit level, and it's very interesting to start to pick it apart at the state level. There are mechanisms. I started to dig into them with one of my top priorities is looking at tick-borne illnesses here on Long Island and making sure that we're addressing, as to best of our ability, how do we start to confront the fact that our tick populations are just skyrocketing, more and more every year. We have new diseases, diseases on diseases, and folks of all ages are being exposed to them. So, both in public health and also environmentally, we're looking into this. Hello, you can come on in if you're, come on in. Port Jeff Civic?
No.
Okay, next time. There you go. There you go.
Catch them while they
We'll
yawn.
probably not, if we have an art or a craft next time. So in looking at that, I had introduced a bill to put 2 species of ticks. It was the Asian longhorn tick, and then there was another tick that we have here that's invasive. The other ticks are native, but I'm not gonna go protecting them. But in the process of introducing this bill, I got pushback saying, oh, well, there's this kind of list and that kind of list of invasives and this, and so now it's a project over the summer when we realized, all right, in the heat of Albany session, this bill isn't moving forward this time, but now in the off session, my legislative director and my whole team continues to dig in and look and see what barriers did we hit during the on session that we can then try to move forward, and figure out ways forward. So questions like that as far as other species go and how do these lists work and what do they do are relevant there. So I always invite everyone, if you have specific species, specific concerns, please email, reach out. We kind of put them in if we're already working on something, we say, okay, great. When we have that meeting with the DEC or with the Invasive Species Council, we'll be able to bring those up and ask these questions. You mentioned flooding briefly. I do want to share that we get an opportunity to invite the Speaker of the New York State Assembly to come visit our districts and visit 1 or 2 locations in the district. And without hesitation, my first ask was to bring him to the Port Jefferson Fire Department to experience himself, with looking at the water lines where they're drawn on the fire department walls, and the area and our village itself to see what is happening here and why it needs so much help. And the fire department had said that they were looking for funding for a feasibility study to see if it's possible to move the fire department to the top of Myrtle, across the street from St. Charles Hospital, where there was the old pen and pencil building, right? Or crayon building, some kind of writing utensil building.
Yeah.
And so they needed funding for a feasibility study, so we were able to get them $65,000 on the spot to have that feasibility study funded so they could move forward in, again, moving our public safety officers outside of a flood zone when we need them the most, because they're the ones, driving those high water vehicles through the water to come and save our butts if we got caught in a flash flood. which is happening all too
You
frequently.
beat me to that question.
There you go.
And the last question that comes from me is, again, we're working so much on walkability issues, and a lot of the time, the challenge comes in, not just in funding, but also in, well, the village is not gonna touch this piece of property because it belongs to the state, and this piece of property because it belongs to the town of Brookhaven, and this property because it's too far away. How and in what way do you think your office can help us to navigate those conflicts, or untangling who actually needs to make the first move, because sometimes it's so incredibly challenging.
Sure. Well, we're so lucky, in this area with the county level. We have Legislator Engelbright, Jonathan Kornreich from town of Brookhaven is a very active representative as well. And so we're happy, to sit down at the table with anyone. I've reached out to the board and asked to come to a meeting, and they can go into the next work session. It's next week, 2 weeks from now. It's sometime this month. I'm going to the work session, just to give a general presentation, updates, and take questions and start the relationship from this side, where I am a representative of the state and want to work with all of our village and town and county representatives in order to get done whatever it is the communities want to get done. So I'll be visiting all of the villages throughout the district in this way. But if Port Jeff Village wants to sit down at the table with these other entities, I'm happy to help facilitate that. I'm sure we wouldn't get a lot of resistance from folks. And I had secured the USGS federal flood study for the village, and in that was very excited that there is a case where now you have the federal level looking down from that mile high view to say, we're not squabbling over who owns what. They're really looking to understand, where does the water come from, where does it go, and what infrastructure can really be put in place in order to mitigate this, like what will actually be effective. And so I think it's at that point that the conversation would have to say, all right, if they're locating this infrastructure there, who owns those properties, and how do we all work together to make that happen?
Wonderful. Let's open up the floor, and if you can stand up, give us your name so we know how to, for posterity, and speak louder. Let's start with 1, and then 2, 3. Okay.
I popped my hand up right away, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Janice, you met me before. I'm a recording secretary of the Civic Association. I'm also on the walkability. And I failed to mention that we have all of our committee here. Marilyn Ramirez Damascus, Michael Schwarting, and Bob Larrabee. But we're also coming from a personal perspective. I am on the tree committee, and we have a couple of people from the tree committee, which is part of the village, that's come up and is directly related to what you're saying, is what we're doing about porous, not laying down non-porous materials. Because I feel like, we don't want to have any infrastructure anymore with non-porous materials. So even sidewalks and tree plantings, that if we can always think back to when we plant a tree, or we're building a parking lot, or we're building a sidewalk, I'm starting to learn about structural soil and how important that is. Of course, if it's under a non-porous material, it's not going to help. But if we have a sidewalk, we plant a tree, from what I understand, everything underneath the sidewalk is supposed to be structural soil, so the roots of the tree don't disturb the sidewalks, and the trees actually live a nice healthy life because their roots will go down. Now I don't know what the state, the county, is involved with those kinds of things, but most importantly, I would think the flooding problem, maybe there's things in legislation about porous versus non-porous material.
Sure. No, it's one of these issues that hyper locally would need to be applied, but at the state level, if there's building code that exists that or legislation that requires sidewalks to be built a certain way, or discludes something from that is in a newer technology or sort of a newer method of creating a sidewalk with porous material, then that's something that we can absolutely look at. I actually sit on the Government Operations Committee, so I'm in GovOps, environmental conservation, small business, local government, and It's another, oh my goodness, it's the one I always feel like I neglect it.
You said economic development?
Economic development, thank you. Is it Emily Murphy, my chief of staff, everybody.
Yeah.
The other half of my brain. And so sitting on GovOps, I'm able to, that's a committee where I have a little bit more strength in saying, okay, if there's something in the building code that needs to be looked at, let's take a look at that. So that we could actually make a note, and we have an intern program. So if you know any young people, either high school or college age, who want to engage, we have interns who are coming in and volunteering with the office, and so we have a list of sort of a menu of projects for them to look into. So we'll add that to our legislative project for interns. What I request for them to do is see what are other states doing first about this, because if we don't have to reinvent the wheel, we won't. If we do have to invent the wheel, we will. But I just came back from the National Conference of State Legislators. I went to a conference called the Future Summit, which is legislators 45 and younger from both parties who come together to say, hey, what's the great work that's going on in our communities, and how do we just put politics aside and get great work done. So I'm really into trying to see what's succeeding in other states, and communities, and how do I bring that back to New York. So that's something that I'll have the interns, look further into, and then it gets onto the desk of my legislative director to see what we can do.
Thank you. Your question was asked?
No, she started to touch on it, but it's related, but it's different. My name's Carol Pietro. I'm wondering if, with the talk about cesspools and the help available for replacing your septic system, for people who are contemplating replacing, let's say, a driveway, is there any conversation at all about help for doing permeable surface instead of the old blacktop driveway?
Sure. No, and that's another great thing that we'll make note of, and see if that's something that we can tap into an existing fund. That's always what I like to do first, instead of trying to add more to the budget.
Right.
What I like to do is say what similar funds exist. My husband and I we had the Foxnell and Bed and Breakfast is since closed. I'm committing 110% myself to this role, but we had put in a grass pave driveway as part of our driveway, and so it's like little it's like Lego pieces almost.
It's like grids, yeah.
You know it, yeah.
I'm looking at it for my driveway, but with gravel.
Yeah, we could sideline it, but it's really it's an awesome way to have a driveway, but not pave an area. But even locally, our building code is sort of scratching their head at it. Like, what is this? It's a driveway, but it's not a driveway. But you put cars on it, but it's a lawn. But so that's the kind of thing. Again, I'd be happy to work with local trustees to see if local building code needs to be adjusted, but also at the state level, because this wasn't something that was widely discussed before. It's becoming widely discussed. Thank goodness, and thank you for looking into it.
Yeah, they're even starting to talk about, I heard in some places, taxing on the amount of rainfall that comes off your roofs, down your downspouts, and goes into the ground. I mean, I personally have I had two rain barrels. I was looking to buy more when I saw that Brookhaven Town was selling them at like half price.
Yes,
so I ran over there and got a couple more.
There
You can
go.
put your downspouts into them and then use that to water your lawn.
There you go.
It's not a big thing, but it's something.
Every little bit makes a difference, and I know there's also, I want to say the funding got capped for this, like reached, and was all spent this year. But every year for the last few years, there's it's like Long Island Native plant something. There's a fund where you can get up to $500 a refund if you submit receipts for rain barrels. For native plants, for rain garden plants, all this. So I'm sure the Civic can share.
Yeah,
resources.
Suffolk County actually gives a rebate on the rain barrels.
There you go.
Because you're using less water to water your garden.
That's it. And so so it's so there's these non-point sources. Everyone's got runoff from their own property. How do we help with that? As well as you have these big point sources of if you have a large municipal parking lot, how do you help with that? And it's all important. So thank you.
Alrighty. One, and then you.
Hi, Barbara Hagel. I'm sorry I can't stand.
No,
I have
please.
a leg injury. It's nothing to do with the environment. What's happening with the right to life, right to death?
Sure. So that was passed in both the Senate and the Assembly, and the governor is now looking at it. So so that's where it's at, and we'll see.
So both houses signed off on it?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Wow.
We have one and then two.
I'm John Russell. I'm the head of the Quality of Life Committee, so I have to plug that.
Nice.
And one of our members is here. Where's Bob?
Oh.
Oh, there he is. He's on the committee also. So I have one statement and two questions. So I thought of something. I have to plug my gas-powered leaf blowers fight. But you mentioned water. Those blowers really degrade the soil quality.
They do.
So it's one is doesn't absorb the water. We have a flooding problem here in Port Jefferson, right? So that's not helping. And then the other thing you mentioned, which I didn't really think about, was the aquifer. That water is not being absorbed, right? So you think all year round, every day they're blowing and blowing and completely degrading that soil, and it's probably having a big impact. So more of a statement, but
No, it's something that you and I have spoken about. I've spoken out on the board for a while, and the Conservation Advisory Council as well. A lot, in my researching over the last 6 months or so, I found that most of that work is still being done at at local government levels, so village, town. I think I've seen a couple counties do something as far as local ordinances go. I'll check again to see if anything in the states passed at the state level. But it's very interesting to see the ways that different local governments have tackled this specific issue. It's something that, I was just at a friend's pool Saturday. I got 2 hours in my afternoon. So I sat over there, put my feet in the pool, and we're trying to chat, but the neighbor is leaf blowing. And we're like, what did you say? We're trying to have this relaxed. And so we've all, whether it's that kind of scenario or, when you really stop it and think about it environmentally, the degradation that's happening. To Anna's point, we've sort of as a society decided everything has to be neat and tidy, and we want it to look a certain way, and we do want everyone to have the right to have their yard look in the way they do. Technology is coming along as far as battery powered or plug-in goes. Like I have a plug-in one that we use 3 times a year. But some municipalities are saying, all right, the gas-powered ones can be used for sort of the spring cleanup and the fall cleanups, but not, there's sort of blackout dates in the middle. Some of them say certain days of the week, they have they can use certain hours. So, these are conversations, again, I'll look into it at the state level to see if anything passed this year in other states, but I think largely it is villages and towns largely, and sometimes counties, will pass local ordinances, which are more reflective of the needs of the hyper-local community, because what we're experiencing in Port Jeff might be different than what they're experiencing on a South Shore community or somewhere in the middle of the island, and so tailoring it here is something. But that's something that I definitely am in support of limiting. At this point, because of the environmental and the quality of life.
I think most
issue.
people just think the most obvious thing right away is the noise, right?
Right.
But most people don't think about the environmental impacts, like especially the water, the flooding, and that so you led into my second question I was going to ask, but I know that there was the bill that got close for the rebates for the electric, which would have been extremely helpful to get rid of gas-powered leaf blowers. So, is that going to come back next year, or are there other things that can be done?
I think it's going to be interesting to see what shifts at the federal level. There's been a lot of disincentivizing of electric vehicles and other equipment, which is, there used to be federal rebates or subsidies, and then state as well. So between if the federal ones have gone away for programs like that, and the state is now going to have to be supplementing for Medicaid and other education programs from federal cuts, I think we're going to be looking at a really tough year budgetarily as far as new asks go, because we're tightening our belt even more. I'm always looking to tighten New York's budget belt in general, but we're looking at the real core of what's keeping people healthy and alive here in this coming year or two because of the federal cuts, and but that's something that obviously would be very helpful.
Yeah, I agree too. A lot of this is being tackled successfully at the local level. Many communities have already done this and more continue to do it, so probably it's easier to do it in one village than a whole state, right? But I was kind of disappointed that bill didn't get signed, because that would have taken away the excuse, hey, well, we can't afford to go to electric.
Sure. No, I'm always a fan of carrots and not sticks, right?
Yeah.
So if you say, hey, if you have a gas powered one, it's kind of like, towards the end of the life, why don't you, consider doing this, and look, here's, $50 off, or, whatever it is to help bring that cost down to be more comparable. I do remember, and I don't know if this is gonna stay on track, but that, it was Home Depot or Lowe's, or both of them were saying that they were gonna phase out selling the gas-powered ones, in the next 5 years or so, just because they understand that, probably demand is gonna be going down, which is good. And you'll always have, the ones, my father's the king of keeping everything alive, for, well past, it's like, Franken leaf blower at this point. But, so those will, persist and come on, but if new homeowners, or when people are replacing them, those aren't available, that'll also be helpful with the problem.
That's it, thank you. I
You're-
appreciate you being so pro-environment also.
Absolutely, thank you for all of your action and leadership here.
Hi, I'm Gail Sternberg. I've lived in the village for 43 years, and I've never been more nervous driving around Suffolk County. The deer population is out of control. Almost everybody knows one person that either hit a deer or knows somebody that hit a deer. And also the electric bikes. They're all over the place. They're kids. They're too young to have driver's license, and they're going faster than me. I don't know if it's in your purview to control any of this. When I lived in New Jersey, I believe it was 50 years ago, that they had salt licks for deer that had birth control in them. I don't know if there's any environmentally safe things for deer, but it's getting really out of control. My property is covered with deer. When I moved in 43 years ago, there was nothing, and I'm still startled to see it. Is there anything that we can do to kind of slow the deer growth? I don't know if they have any enemies. And also to control these bikes that are on the road.
Right. So two really hot topics, Gail, and I'll start with the deer. For example, we've been talking to the Strong's Neck is not an official village government, but it's it's got a civic association and a community, and so they as a community have been coming together and trying to figure out what they want to collectively do. They've been bringing the DEC to talk about if they want to allow hunting on certain properties there. And so, for me, it's leading up to the community to say, is that an option that they want to pursue or not? There are these other methods, they call it Bambi birth control, whether by, they have like a salt lick, and essentially they go through rollers, and so they'll like roll on,
I don't know how it worked. I thought
birth
it was
control.
in the salt.
Yeah, the salt attracts them. And then another method it's even more costly is darting them and sort of, administering that way.
Yeah.
But it's again, you're looking at the costs of these programs and more importantly, the effectiveness. And unfortunately, they're finding that in the state has spent a lot of money on seeing, all right, how do we do this? And either of those programs, if you miss, especially the male deer, one male deer can do a lot of damage.
Yeah.
So,
cars.
yeah. Well, yeah. With
Yeah,
yes.
you hit one.
Yeah. So that's a public safety concern. It goes back to our tick conversation.
Yes.
The spreading of ticks as well. If you ever get up close to them, you see their ears are just covered in engorged ticks. It's sad, and they're suffering as well. So that's something that we continue to explore. It's a tricky issue here in Suffolk County because we are tight communities. Some people love seeing the deer in their backyard and wouldn't want to harm them.
I don't want them in the backyard. I don't like them in my driveway at
Correct.
night when I'm getting in and out.
Correct. Yeah. Or I mean, listen, y'all know I live right on Main Street, and a couple times a year, deer get hit crossing Main Street because they come down. There's a little grassy hill. They come down and they just go out, and they don't. Their parents didn't say look both ways, and and there that is, and you feel bad for the drivers too, who are all traumatized by. Killing an animal, but then also the damage to your car.
Yeah, they come through the windshield.
Yeah.
I know a girl that went right through the windshield.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's dangerous to humans as well. And so then to the bike issue, that's something we're actively looking into. I run into Mayor Shepro, who mentioned this, and it was already on our list, but I had our legislative intern during session pull active legislation that's looking at the issue of these e-bikes that are going 50 miles an hour, and you have a 14-year-old with no helmet on, and where it's the Wild West. And so absolutely, this is something that the state's looking into. We are excited that e-bikes are experiencing popularity because of the non-vehicular transportation that they provide, but we're talking about maybe limiting their speed. So you can't sell something that goes over a certain speed, and if you do, it goes into a different category, and then you have to get a registration, a license for it, as if it were a Vespa or something, a motor
Or
vehicle.
an age limit.
Right, and then what are the helmet
Because I've
laws?
seen some really young kids on this, and another one
Absolutely.
was riding one double on the bike
Yes.
in my neighborhood.
Right,
So I
right.
mean,
And so we're
no helmets, no nothing.
We're also, continuing as a trustee. I built a relationship with Suffolk County Police Department. We're continuing that relationship and talking to them about what are they seeing in their day-to-day, what are the enforcement mechanisms and challenges. Another enforcement conversation that everyone at Suffolk knew me as the loud car lady, the loud muffler lady, because that's one of my quality of life issues, that especially living on Main Street, but all throughout the village, any straightaway that's there, you hear those backfiring mufflers, and they're way breaking the decibel limit. So something that we're also looking into or just watching closely is New York City has a pilot program going for something like, it's like speed cameras but noise cameras. So as far as enforcement goes, it's difficult for either, constables can't chase cars down, but even Suffolk PD to chase these cars down because you hear it, but was it that car, was it that car? Whereas in the city, they put it, and if a car goes through and it's breaking the decibel limit, picture, ticket, that's it. And the tickets are hefty. They're like $800
Oh, wow.
or something crazy. The problem is that these systems are modified by the car owners themselves. They're sort of a plug and play. So, at first we said, oh, well, what about going to the inspection stations and looking in to see, if they're passing a car through the inspection that has a modified muffler, you can say, all right, we're taking away your inspection license. But someone can, to my understanding, can just pop
Turn it on and off.
turn it on and off, do this, do that. So, we got it. They'll always be clever, and find some way around things, but we have to start enforcing this because it is, we all love strolling through our beautiful village, and when you're strolling there and suddenly it sounds like a machine gun is going off next to you, it's jarring. It's or you're sitting in your yard if you're close enough to a place or a restaurant. It's just really, it's a quality of life issue, and I always half joke and say it's an argument for mental health support for people, because I really think that the folks who put these on their cars, it's a cry for help. They're like, look at me, So anyway, so we'll continue with mental health support as well for everybody. Yeah.
We have one question there, and then
Steve Velasquez. The question that I have pertains to the village, but also outside the village. I was trying to see what possibly is going on in Albany as far as protecting open land, and I know you had mentioned the 40 acres up in Lawrence Aviation property, but also the solar on that property of 40 acres. Has there been any talk of possibly preserving land like they used to, where they would purchase it, or they would not, when someone sold the farm or something, they would have to pay the full cost of back taxes or something to prevent the sale of land for development?
Sure. So there's part of that, it sounds like, is selling development rights, which property owners can do. But I'm always looking for ways to work with the county, with the town and the village if it's interested in land preservation. We're going back to our flooding conversations and the deer conversation. I always think of my father grew up in Smithtown. He just celebrated his 72nd birthday. And when he was a child in Smithtown, his childhood was running through forests and farm fields and all this open space. And I just think about his one lifetime, and then all the change that has happened, and all of that open space being developed in a single lifetime. And so I think collectively, the majority opinion is we have to pump the brakes on this real fast, because it's very difficult to rewild land. It can be done, and so that's something I also look into my spare time.
Homegrown National Park.
There we go. There we
As an
go.
idea.
So but here in Port Jeff, there's a couple of pieces of open space. I know up on Belterre Road, there's sort of the mouth of a ravine near an office park that was for sale, and they were proposing something, and it's like we have to be looking at smaller pieces like that, as well as back behind Mather. There's 20 acres or so, the last sort of large piece of woodland in Port Jeff. I stand ready to be a partner for preservation if the village decides that it wants to aggressively pursue this, both with funding, looking to tap. The DEC acquires land sometimes, so putting land on the open space radar there to try to get funding from the DEC, but then also looking for other methods of funding. And then you have nonprofits like the Peconic Land Trust, who, especially for open space like farmland, they will come in and purchase the land and then rent it out to farmers and keep it open space, but in an economically viable way. So we're looking at, throughout the district, there's a couple of properties that we're looking at, perhaps working with the Peconic Land Trust as well. But open space preservation is my number one. I've been working with Stony Brook University on a number of pieces of legislation and things that they want to do. And I told them on day one, and I'll tell the new president, when we get to sit down, I will help you with anything for the university as long as you're not taking woodland down. I said, you have a big sprawling footprint there, and you have all of these buildings that have, it's like $2 billion worth of deferred maintenance, across the campus. I said, solve one problem with another. I know you'll have to play sort of a, move around game for a couple of years, but if you have a building that needs, $500 million worth of work, you make a new plan for that footprint to have that use in it. And I think, I hope I speak for the community when I say, especially on the Stony Brook campus, we'd rather you go up a few stories than take down woodland to build a 2 or 3 story building. They already have that monstrous hospital that you can see from Pirates Cove. They can't do any worse than that, and they're not gonna go, that high again. But use the footprint you have. It goes back to our permeable surface, conversation as well, and our open space. I told them I will fight tooth and nail for whatever you want to do, unless you're taking trees down, in which case I will fight against you.
I would like to kind of point out a really interesting controversy or contradiction. Taking out 40 acres of vegetated land and to turn it into a solar farm, to me that's a really bizarre
I think
idea.
it's largely unvegetated, so it's the old Lawrence
Even
Aviation.
if it's unvegetated, it preserves an opportunity to rewild and provide a better seepage for a recharge of the water. And we have so many parking lots, and we have so many other opportunities. When I drive and I park in the parking lot, what do I look for? A shady place, because there's so much sun.
Yeah.
What can New York State do, again, to facilitate the use of that footprint so we don't have to take down? We can incentivize the community. The state might not even need to come in to revegetate that land, because I know that Port Jefferson Station right now is discussing how to take a good stewardship of the 4 acres of the old chip and drive property
Right,
that
right, right.
the town of Brooklyn was working on.
Right, and
providing. So
yeah.
I'm like,
and I agree fully. I always, solar over parking lots is a no-brainer to me. You already have, the land cleared and flat. I think this is the balance of, I followed as a trustee for years the Suffolk County Land Bank, trying to figure out how there can be an economically viable way to move forward, preserving the 40 acres, having some kind of economic driver on 40, and then being able to move our green infrastructure forward. So there's no perfect solutions in this difficult climate, and so balancing all of those things. There's conversations at the state level. I know similarly, because solar panels actually they don't really prevent the water from it's not impermeable. They obviously if you have leaves and forests and everything, it's better for absorption. But they're even looking at agrivoltaics now, where you allow for solar panels to be installed on agricultural fields, so where there's cows or some kind of light farming going on, but in a way that allows tractors to move between them, so that they can maintain the farmland, with our farmers struggling with being able to really make ends meet. and especially with extreme weather, they're extra challenged. So they're looking at allowing for these agrivoltaics where you're using the land for both things, because I do agree, using open space just for solar farms, it's a little frustrating, but if we can come into a world where we figure out how to balance, that's gonna be the best thing.
Hi, Michael Schwarting. I would like to second this discussion about the impervious paving on private properties and driveways and parking lots. I think there's mechanisms in the city, in the village to do that. The village code requires every new project to have a plan approval, and the plan approval has a list of things that are required to meet for that approval. A lot of these issues about stormwater containment on private properties could be much stronger stated, I think, in the code, and that might be a place to go. Also, the village code requires lawn sprinkler systems, has always required them, as part of the planning approval. And I think that maybe should be looked at in some way, why that is necessary.
I don't disagree with either, but you would look at your two trustees
We don't have trustees in the presence, right?
No.
You would look at people
We have
outside of this room.
residents.
Oh, yes.
Organizing the residents to make
Yeah, I
that
wasn't
happen.
meaning to.
No, I know,
put
but
it on you,
I'm with you.
general information.
I'm with you. No, and I appreciate the echoing and the consensus in the room.
Good evening, Matthew Franco, trustee in the Village of Port Jefferson. I have a favor. And I'll send you my information. I would love the information on taking that the recharged water and using it at the golf course. So maybe we can get like a little bit of symbiotic relationship between the village and your office to kind of get that moving along. I think that would be fantastic. So I'll send you my email. Anything you can send would be great.
Perfect.
And I'd like to say thank you, because we are in the process, and I'm trying to get information on doing this meadow project next to the catering hall. And I brought up to one of the trustees, and I tried to bring it up to the mayor. They still have RCA that was underneath the tennis courts, and it's a stone lime mixture that hardens so you can put hardened pavement on it. And I was explaining to the head of grounds at the golf course that has to be taken out, because grass is typically a short-rooted plant, whatever it is. And so it doesn't drain well. And if we're gonna have RCA still underneath it, even though it's 4 inches above, that's not gonna be a successful drainage. Now, I know they're putting in French drains, but this project seems to be, especially on the bluff, we have enough problems on the bluff. I'm not sure that this is the best utilization of that area, which I'm gonna bring up at the work session. So, but thank you for bringing up that information about the aquifer. I just wanted to say,
Of course.
it helps my discussion.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for your work. It's great to be able to have these discussions intermunicipally. Obviously my jurisdiction has some bounds, but my work as someone who can have these conversations, and again, we're so lucky to have someone who's been serving for decades with an environmental mind and been able to lead up a lot of efforts, well beyond the district with Pine Barrens and water conservation, but also, we're all looking at the bluff as, one of the big issues here, is something that I've looked at for many years on the village board. And so I will be respectful of the jurisdiction, and also be happy to be in conversations where I bring my expertise, as someone who understands native plants and water flow. And I do agree that if you have soil and then a impermeable surface, it's just gonna hit the surface and go somewhere else. Yeah.
Any more questions? Questions one, please.
Brock. I have a question. First off, I'd like to commend you for getting the extra money from the state for the conversion to septic systems. But going back a number of years ago, when Suffolk County mandated that any failed cesspools have to be replaced by septic systems, the county put up a fair amount of money for people. And the next tax cycle, these people got a letter from the IRS that said, you received untaxed income and you owe us and these were huge sums of money.
Hmm.
So I wonder if anything has been resolved with the state and the IRS so that people don't take this $25,000 that you were successful in getting and finding out that they owe income tax on it.
I appreciate that, and Emily is taking a note, to make sure that we don't, and I see Steve chuckling, so he knows something about this too. So we will, we'll touch base, but it's a really, really great point as far as making sure, sometimes there's unintended consequences, and I always love to learn from history when I can.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. All right, well,
All right.
it's been an absolute pleasure to be home.
Thank you for coming in.
Of course.
It's always a pleasure. We need to clear out from here at 8:30. Our next meeting will be, and Art, I haven't forgotten about you. Our next meeting will be September 8th, and we will be talking about the gasoline-powered equipment and the quality of life issues. Please stay around, hang out, have more conversations, and please.
Sorry to cut. My closing note is always, if you have an issue, or if your neighbor has an issue, friend, whatever, whoever in the district has, tell them to call us. Because even if they think that, why would my state official be able to help with that? Maybe we can't, but maybe we can, and I'm surprised every darn day of what my team can do. So Emily, I have 2 legislative aides in the office, and we get calls, someone says, there's a weird charge on my utility bill. I don't know where this $4 came from. This was a case last week. And I said, I'm like, can we do something about this? And we have an intergov. They looked into it. That charge shouldn't have been there. They got the charge taken off the bill. So is the $4 the point of it? No. But the point is, whenever there's an issue that you have that you want some guidance on, we are always happy to look into it for you. If we can help you, try to point you in the right direction. We always say we can't guarantee that the outcome is going to be what you want it to be, but sometimes just shining a light on something, if Department of Labor is taking a while to get unemployment payments out, or you're waiting for something from the DMV, please just give us a call, and we'll be really happy to help anyone out. So.
Alrighty, and